I would like to introduce Junior Jacob Robinson, who will actually open the day with a lesson.
Thank you guys, thank you everybody. Excuse me for talking over any of my veteranos here, my veteranas here, all my cantantes here. We're not gonna dance for you guys. Normally we would dance, but we're just gonna wake you guys up with the drum. Hit it to kind of wake you guys up a little bit. Also, remember the directions from where all of our ancestors live, all of our grandmas and our grandpas, you know. We always talk about land acknowledgement here, but we always have to remember that those Mexicano people that came across, a lot of them brought those native ways with them, you know, those native songs with them. The danza would not be here unless it was brought with them. So all these sacred things that we have, you know, they were carried and brought over in a good way, and we take care of it here in the United States, just like they do down there in Mexico. So we're gonna open, just hit the drum, wake you guys up, and also blow the concha, the tecocoli to the four directions. Thank you.
Now I would like to invite our provost, Ms. Gail Mackin, to come and say a few words.
Good morning, Aztlán. First, I'd like to thank April Barocas for organizing this. She didn't introduce herself, so I will. She and others have done so much today for today's event, and it's just it's marvelous to know that we have such dedicated people who put this together. It is such a joy and an honor to welcome you to the 5th Annual Aztlán Research Center Summer Institute here at Colorado State University, Pueblo. I am deeply moved to stand before this vibrant gathering, nearly 200 strong, made up of students, faculty, staff, artists, community members, and visitors from surrounding institutions. This is what a thriving academic and cultural community looks like. Today's theme, Aztlán Futures, Generational Healing Through Art and Storytelling, invites us into a sacred and necessary conversation. It reminds us that the future is not just ahead of us, it is within us, shaped by memory, tradition, creativity, passed down and rising up through generations. This is more than a conference. This is a space of community, creativity, and cultural reflection. It is an act of collective care and resistance. It is deeply grounded in the experiences, wisdom, and dreams of Chicano and indigenous communities right here in southern Colorado and far beyond. As we reflect today on displacement, identity, sovereignty, and healing, we also are invited to reflect on place, on land. Let me begin then by honoring that we are gathered on the traditional lands of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples, and we acknowledge the many indigenous peoples who have stewarded this land over time. That stewardship continues, and so does the responsibility we all share to understand the stories of this place and act as caregivers for what comes next. Our day opens with the incredible Garcia of Teatro, who will guide us through reflections on displacement and Chicano theater, drawing from his decades of storytelling and activism rooted in the Westside of Denver. Tony's work is proof that art can be a vessel for justice, memory, and transformation. We'll then turn to Matt Garcia, whose ecological art practices push us to reimagine land, culture, and sustainability through a decolonizational lens. Matt is also one of our own, an associate professor here at CSU Pueblo and the Chicano Studies Program Coordinator. We are grateful for his leadership, scholarship, and artistry. Later, Dr. Ramona Beltran will speak to the power of storytelling as medicine, offering insights into how research rooted in cultural practices can be a force for healing, joy, and justice. And our final speaker, Dr. Dylan Miner, will guide us through an exploration of Chicano art, low writing, and indigenous sovereignty across Turtle Island, showing us how creativity and resistance are intertwined. We will close today with a celebration, mariachi music, a book signing, and an art exhibit. But more than that, I hope we leave with a sense of community, of clarity, and of momentum. Let me take a moment to recognize the Aztlán Research Center and our Chicano Studies program here at CSU Pueblo. These programs are not simply our academic units, they are living, breathing, cultural anchors. They foster community, elevate marginalized histories, and make space for future thinking. We're proud to support this work, and I'm especially thrilled to share that we have recently hired our first standalone tenure-track faculty in Chicano Studies, Dr. Jesus Jaime Diaz. This is a milestone for CSU Pueblo and a testament to the university's deepening commitment to ethnic studies and culturally relevant scholarship. Finally, thank you for the many people who made this day possible, the organizers, speakers, student assistants, and behind-the-scenes staff, and many of them, who brought this vision to life. Thank you to all of you for being here. Your presence today is meaningful. It affirms the importance of culture, of story, of gathering together in spaces that honor both struggle and celebration. I encourage you to learn I'm sorry, I saw that this morning and I said it wrong that time too. I encourage you to lean into the conversations, engage with art, ask questions, share your own stories. Today is about reflection, yeah, but it's also about connection and creating momentum to go forward. What we take from this room can ripple outward into our classrooms, our communities, and our collective future. So once again, welcome to CSU Pueblo, and welcome to the 2025 Aztlán Research Center Summer Institute. I look forward to a day filled with reflection and inspiration. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mackin. Next, it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Tony Garcia. With deep roots in Denver's Chicano community, Anthony J. Garcia has spent over 5 decades as a playwright, composer, educator, activist, and nonprofit leader. As executive artistic director of Teatro, the nation's third oldest Chicano theater, Tony has brought urgent stories to the stage tackling themes of gentrification, displacement, racial inequity, immigration, war, and love. Born and raised in Denver's Westside, Tony was shaped by the Chicano movement and the forced displacement of his community to build the Aurora campus. That history fuels much of his work, including the Westside Oratorio, which chronicles 7 generations of Westside families from 1858 to 1970. Tony began with Su Teatro in 1972 as a musician and soon became its leading playwright and creative force, contributing over 40 original works and guiding its transformation into a cornerstone of Chicano and Latino arts. In 1989, he led the company's move to Santa Fe Drive and helped build its national profile. Tony's influence extends beyond the stage. He served as a faculty member in the Department of Chicano Studies at Metro State College for over 25 years, and is a board member of the National Association of Latino Art and Culture, and a former board member of the Western States Art Federation. His honors include the United States Artist Rockefeller Fellowship, UC Irvine's Chicano Literary Award, and the Boneville Staten Livingston Fellowship, among many others. Tony continues to advocate for equitable representation of cultural work and organizations, mentor young artists, contribute to civic change, and shine a light on Colorado's Chicano community. Please join me in welcoming Tony Garcia.
Thank you. Well, she does a great job. You guys are lucky to have this woman. She's what? Surcando el cielo de América, sangre de viento avanzando, formas de fuego en la noche, trinas de allí. Cantos de llanto del lirio, guitar mostly because I wanted to demonstrate some things, and I figured let's just take care of this part now. So later on during COVID, I started thinking about Danny. Danny's a good friend of mine, and Danny was very, very close to Jorge Gonzalez's family with Teatro Campesino and such, and he's always telling me stories about them. And then he also worked with United Farm Workers, and so he had that relationship with Cesar Chavez. So I started doing this song, and I said, I wrote this song about you. And then after Danny heard it, this is always Danny kind of thing. Danny goes, well, that's not about me, it's about you. So it's like, let's try it, let's see how we go. So it is the two fathers. In my life I've had two fathers. One was of the sun and one was of the earth. We stood beside the sacred waters, baptized me and witnessed my rebirth. Walked along the burning highway, a million steps, 300 miles in the heat. Arm in arm, our hearts were racing. Heads held high as we went marching through the streets. Oh, rise, we shall rise. From the land through the mountains, we shall rise. Oh, rise, we shall rise. With the fire of the sun, we shall rise. I don't know the lyrics by heart, sorry. Pray, take a glass of water, and go. You know, computers are good when they work. Sorry. It's not scrolling, but I want to. Just, there we go. Okay. And ready to go again? Fist of rage and words of power. A poet sung that cried for dreams untold. The children's eyes are dreams with flowers. A gentle hope that is both brave and bold. Oh, rise, we shall rise. Climb through the mountains, we shall rise. Oh, rise, we shall rise. With the fire of the sun, we shall rise. Learn the lessons of my fathers. Pass to you what we have always known. That we were stronger with the knowledge. Walked across the paths that they have sown. Oh, rise, we shall rise. Climb through the mountains, we shall rise. Oh, rise, we shall rise. Fire of the sun, we shall rise. So, I was always one of those kids that I heard other things in the things that were happening. So I was one like people say sometimes like I'm always had this way to get attention, and that's a problem if you're a kid like me. If you were a kid like me, because I was always doing something that I did not want them to give me that attention. That attention for, right? In the spelling bees, I would find the bad word in the middle of the word and then manage to emphasize it, right? And the nuns had no way of, if there was, assassin, right? And I would say ASS and then wait, right? And the kids would all laugh, and then I would be in trouble, right? And so all these things, it's not a linear piece that comes with me. for a really long time, right? And then he quit. And then we went to this restaurant, and suddenly he started realizing that he was getting his taste buds back. And the two of them are in the restaurant, and they're going, oh, look at those chicken. I'm like, you guys need a separate space for this, right? But that's how the art work, that's how it happens to us, right? And I've always well, let me just go on to the other piece of it. Okay, so I grew up in the Westside. I grew up in Denver's Westside. And Denver was even more segregated in those days than it is now, maybe. And so if you went too far south, you ended up in an area where you didn't belong. So I'm walking down the street, I'm probably about 14, 15 years old, and these three white kids in a pickup truck, I'm not making up the stereotype, that's exactly what there was, right? They pulled up, and one of them yelled at me, "Hey, Beaner." And I was like, okay, I love beans. I don't consider that an insult. You know, I think that's a very accurate description. So I was okay. You know, and then somebody said, go back where you came from. And it was like, well, I live in the Westside. That's like about 10 blocks away from here. And then the other one yelled, go back to Mexico. Now that really stumped me because I had never been to Mexico. How could I go back to Mexico when I've never been? And my father had never been to Mexico. My mother had never been to Mexico. They were both from Pueblo. And Pueblo was Mexico. In fact, this is the scary part. So my dad was born in Tucumcari. My grandmother, my mother's mother, was born in Las Vegas. But my father's mother was born in Chaparrito, which is outside of Las Vegas. And I just keep hoping so many times that they're really not related. That was kind of scary for me. So it's like, that was the world I've always approached this stuff, right? My mother was a great storyteller. My mother was a phenomenal storyteller. One day I was having this party after I grew up and I was married, and I hear a knock at the door. It was a boxing, we were going to watch a boxing match. You pay like $30 and then they last 30 seconds and they're all gone. And I had all these friends over the house, and she knocks on the door, and I hear a knock on the door. It's my mother. It's like, I'm really embarrassed because I did not invite her. I didn't think she wanted to come to the boxing match, right? So I didn't think anything of it. And she said, we were just in the neighborhood, and I thought I'd stop in to see you. And I opened the door, there's 30 or 40 of my friends, right? Maybe not, I had a small house, right? But they're all drinking and having a party, and my mom comes in, and that throws everybody stops that, right? And then they give my mom food, she sits down, and my mom starts to tell stories. She just starts talking, and then she starts telling stories. And it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and they were still there, just mesmerized, listening to her stories. The problem is, we grew up, this is all them guys, you're talking about decades, 5 decades at least, right? But I grew up at a time when we didn't have a TV, we were poor, and so what my mom did was she would feed us, and after dinner she'd tell us stories, right? And the problem with the stories was that she would tell us we were going to go to bed, and she'd tell us stories about La Llorona. That's really not a good idea, you go, I'm just going to stay in bed and be here because I and then I realized later on that my mom was telling these stories that were supposed to be about her primos and her tios and all this, and her tias and stuff like that. And they were really other, like my tio Jake did not climb a beanstalk, right? He did not face a giant. He did not. But I didn't know that till I started to read, and I was lucky. I had this thing where reading got easy for me. I had older sisters. They taught me to read when I was about 4 or 5 years old. Not like I was phenomenal. It just was something that I did, and it was easy. And school was just a place for me to go and screw around and mess with the nuns' heads and stuff. I did have one nun go, yeah, we knew you were doing this stuff, right? Afterwards, I grew up. She said, yeah, we knew what you were like. We knew you were doing that. That was your processing. So this leads me to another story, right? My mother's storytelling has always been something that influenced me, and so I had a friend of mine. His sister passed, and I read, and they wrote. I read the obituary they wrote in the local paper, and I said, James, I read what you wrote about your sister, and I was thinking that it really sucks. When April did my intro, okay, when I die, you don't have to do an obituary for me. April just did it. It's done. We move on, I heard it. But I thought, it's so much better if we write those things when people are alive than after they're gone. And I was thinking that about my mom. My mom was already like 93 or something, 92. I said, I was thinking about that about my mom, and not writing this thing till after she dies. And never reached that standard. I knew that very much. So I wrote this piece, and it was pretty emotional. My mother was tough. I mean, she was tiny, but she was tough. We lived behind a bar in the Auraria neighborhood. Our house faced the back of the bar. Those guys used to come out of the bar and they'd pee behind the building. And one night she caught him looking in the windows at my sister's, right, or where my sister's room was. And she went out with a 2x4 and she hit one of them in the head and chased him away, right? And years later, my sister was involved. Her husband, it was a really bad relationship. And her husband one day beat her and beat my sister and left. We lived in the projects and left her out on the grass in front of the projects. My mother brought her into the house. We all got up. I was tiny. I was sitting on the couch. We used to have our living room was 3 couches where we all slept. And so she brings her in. A couple hours later, he comes back and he's beating on the door, right? He's beating on the door and he kicks open the door. And as he walks in, my mother's standing behind him with a crowbar. And she hits him in the head. Bleeding. Oh, it gets better. He's bleeding, and he kind of dodges around and he walks out. And they call the cops. The cops naturally show up long after he's gone, right? And the cop says, "What's the matter with you, lady? You could have killed him." She said, "I was trying to, but the son of a bitch wouldn't go down." That was my mom. And the story was like, so this was in the piece that I wrote for her, right? And after I wrote it, I shared it with my friend James and with Danny Valdez and with Rudy Naya. Rodolfo and I was a friend of mine and that stuff. And I said, okay, I wrote it, here it is, it's done, and then we're done with it. And Rudy says, no, you have to go read it to her. I'm not gonna do that. We're just gonna be a big emotional mess there. I'm not gonna do that. And he goes, he told me about writing Bless Me Ultima. He told me about it was his tia. He has an aunt that was the inspiration for it. And that it was important for him to kind of go to her with those stories and let her know that that was that. Okay, so I did that. So we go to my mom's house, and my daughter Mika, whose name Mikaela Amaya is my mother's name. And my mother once told Mika, she said, listen, you have to be strong because you have my name. Don't make me look bad. Because that's really what it was always about, right? And so we read the piece, and I cried, my daughter cried, my mom cried, and then my mom says, I am so lucky. This is true. I have to tell you, this is absolutely true. Okay, I am so lucky that God gave me a son that was so talented and he could write these beautiful words for me. I'm so glad I didn't abort you when I had the chance. So, understand there's a context of this. I knew this because she had told me earlier. My mother had 4 kids, and that relationship ended, and then my dad moved from Pueblo with 5 kids. He moved next door to his sister. He moved in with his sister. She moved in with her mother in the projects. They lived next door to each other. There was 9 of them, and then they saw each other and decided to make number 10. And her sisters were like, "Are you out of your mind?" And they actually used to use quinine. She said, "I saw the bottle out there. It was there, and at the very last minute, I decided not to do it." And I have some real mixed feelings about that. The feeling is that I support you right. Quinine not a good idea. It'd be better, but I wouldn't be here if that was the case. So for me, those are all the dynamics of the storytelling and how the storytelling just hits out of nowhere. Was that healing? Yes. Was it painful? Was all of those dynamics? We're running. We got 20 minutes done? Okay. So now I'm going to talk to you about how we ended up in the Teatro, right? So some of you know Teatro. Yeah. Sarah was a musician. I got into Teatro because I could do this. Right? That was what I did. The actors are like, okay, do your thing, and the dancers are like, we're gonna make some music and do some stuff out there. And I played with this guy who was really, really good. So that was my role in the teatro, right? But I saw the teatro perform, and I saw Teatro Campesino perform, and it changed me, because I saw people who were like from my neighborhood. I saw people who were in my mom's stories, where I didn't see before. So the background of the teatro is that it has a lot of influences. I remember doing this project. I wrote a piece called Enrique's Journey, which is about the kids that ride on the top of the trains, and from Honduras and stuff. It's a real, it's a novel based that won a Pulitzer and all this stuff. So I've been in the room with all these people developing it, and there was these lines in the jokes that are in the story. I made pieces funny, if you can imagine that. There's these lines that are plays on words, and they kept going, man, that's such a Beckett moment. That's so much Samuel Beckett. It's like, that's not Beckett. That's Cantinflas, right? That's what we grew up with. But the roots of some of that stuff, can we go back into that quote? And I do live by that quote, right? So Charlie Chaplin says, tragedy is when something bad happens to you. Comedy is when something bad happens to somebody else. And they always talk about tragedy plus time, right? And the other day we were at the music festival, and the people are dancing and they're dancing to Puño de Tierra, and they're twirling those. It's like, that's about dying and being a fist of dirt. And we're laughing and singing. Then the whole group, and later on, they were in the concert, they're all singing Volver. And I always think about Volver is like, this is about a guy, the relationship breaks up, and now he's starting to stalk the woman, right? And there's nothing in the song that indicates that she even wants him anywhere back to her, right? It's like, I'm coming back. She says, I'm moving in with my, and I'm getting a gun, right? So that whole piece, when you take that step back, we don't even realize it, right? Let's keep going. And then, let's go more. Let's go look at the teatro stuff. But just the idea that Charlie Chaplin was this guy who was a worker, fought for the workers in terms of the character he creates, the tramp, was actually a proletariat, right? Which is very close to the pelado. The pelado in Cantinflas' work, right? He creates this, Don Fito, this is our version of the Charlie Chaplin. This is such an amazing transformation that Hugo does. This young actor comes out and he's looking at the mural, which he also painted, and then he transforms himself into this version of of Cantinflas. This is he actually, Cantinflas was one of the biggest influences that we had on our teatro and the work that we were doing. And Cantinflas it was so great. He was poor, he wasn't smart, he was just so much 10 times smarter than the rich people was. He was always able to put them into their place. And in that, gave power to those people, to that people who were oppressed and such. We can keep going. And Don Fito was a carpero from, they started working within this style called the carpa. Carpas were tent shows, right? And they used to take them very much, we got influenced by that. We would take our shows out to wherever we were performing, and we would just do it out on the street. So the carpas had that influence. Don Fito is in San Antonio, and I got fortunate that I was able to be introduced to him and influenced us a lot. When we came forward to do a piece called La Carpa Aztlán presents I Don't Speak English Only. And that whole idea of appropriating those things which were oppressive to us that also could become as tools to be used against the oppressor as well. Our carpa made fun of everything that you can imagine was twisted within that whole piece. And it was very funny, because there's two places, I did a piece with Gustavo Ariano, who was the guy who used to write a column called Ask a Mexican, right? And in it, he talks about the car horns, right? What are our car horns, Mexican car horns, right? And we go dun, da, 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 dun, dun, dun. And for English speakers, we think shave and a haircut, 2 bits. What do Mexicanos say? I won't repeat it. You can talk about it later when you walk away from here, right? That's the level of irreverence. The idea of irreverence is a challenge to the system empowerment for people. We all know what it means, and by having that knowledge, that big fat guy who runs the country right now, that kind of stuff like that, and watch it go right past his head, and you go, all right, we're cool. We get a step forward. Let's keep going. We have a lot of that same picture. We can keep going. And then, so also within the carpas, I used to do tandas and revistas, which was musical reviews, right? Beautiful music in the middle. After they just done something completely obnoxious, there's something beautiful. So Luis Valdez once told me, he says, the only way you're going to sell the comedy is by giving them the tragedy. The only way you're going to give them get the tragedy is by selling the comedy, right? So it's this is exactly. I had a moment in a piece that I wrote called Serafin, where it was actually that was written about my father, he's an alcoholic and he's in the street and he has this moment where he's talking about all this horrible stuff in his life, and then he looks down and he sees a dollar bill and his whole attitude changes. He picks it up and he goes into the bar. Right? It's very funny. It becomes, his whole attitude changes, and we go with him, and we go, wait, I thought this was whole terrible. And that whole balance in that is what we use, is a technique. We can keep going. This is more about the carta. Teatro Campesino was such a huge influence on us with Danny and Luis Valdez. And like I said, when I first saw, the first time I saw the Teatro perform, I actually stood up. I was up all night just going through all the processing of what they did. Let's just keep going so we can get to the Teatro stuff, and then, because I'm sorry. I should have edited this, but there was no time between the music festival and coming down here. We, in 1972, 74, I was able to go to Mexico City, Mexico for the first time in my life. And we went there for the festival. First time Chicanos, many Chicanos going down to Mexico City for the first time. We got introduced to Latin American theater. We got introduced to how they had been using this form for so much longer than we had. And I remember standing at the pyramids, and we were performing at the base of the Pyramid of the Moon. And at that performance there, I just felt like the ancestors were there. Everything was kind of in that moment, and it was a transformative moment in my life that I came back, and I realized that this is what I was going to do the rest of my life. It was also the only thing I could do, because I was like one of those extraordinarily average guys you serve me sing, and that I had some skills, but I didn't have, average height, but extraordinarily good looking, but the other stuff is pretty average. So the Teatro left this space for me. I found that I could fit within this, and then eventually the storytelling piece took over. That is an actual low performance. There we go. That's a win. We can stop this. Stop that guy! Alright. That's actually me. And so look how skinny, jeez. And they're, of course, taking my heart. I kept this picture because this is what the Teatro did to me, right? It just laid me down and took out my heart, and then it was like, if I was going to continue functioning, I would have to be staying with them. These are outdoor performances that we did in Denver, and then I thought this was great because it's all these butts, right? And the only one, they're all relaxed. There's only one that's like made up like a fist, right? Sorry, I'm coming with attention. They're all relaxed. All right, there we go. Look at that great concentration. It's not. There was a big reason why I started writing and directing, because everybody was better than me, right? But I knew what they could do. I knew aspects of what they could do, right? And that was a way of getting them on. I understood what they were struggling with. I knew when there was a music was off. I knew when the timing was off. I knew when the chords were different. And I could come and bring that into the picture rather than just saying something's wrong and you need to fix it. It was like, here's how we can fix it because I hear this and that stuff. So that was a good, if you see me on stage, it's a good reason. This is Deborah Gallegos. Some of you know Deborah. Deborah was a tremendous performer. Great. And we were lucky. We got two good singers, really good singers. Deborah Gallegos and Yolanda Ortega, who are in the Chicano Music Hall of Fame. And any stupid thing I came up with, musically, they could fix and make it better, right? And that was always my luck that I had. I was able to find, other people who could improve on the ideas that I have. And that's a collective piece that we have. That's part of the power of that. Everybody gets a piece in that, and you just keep shaping it. And for me, it was very valuable. This is Deborah. As we got fortunate in '86. Oh, look at that. They made me take this. We did this picture for the newspaper. The guy took like 300 pictures, and then he comes in one day, he goes, none of them work, and he pulls me out of my office, and then it was just like really spontaneous, terrible, funny, weird kind of pose picture. Anyway, so I used it so I could make fun of myself. There was a moment, and I'm going quickly because we want to do some questions and answers here. So we talked about our area, and I grew up in that neighborhood. If you don't know about it, it was a Chicano barrio. Many people came up there and they worked in the Westside and worked in Brighton, and they worked in the fields there and stuff. And so we lived in that neighborhood, and then in the late 60s, early 70s, they moved everybody out because they wanted to build a campus there, right? And I didn't think anything of it. I said, well, I did. I didn't like it. But it wasn't until later when the buildings were partially torn down and some of the people had moved, and it wasn't the neighborhood I knew. It wasn't the neighborhood that I grew up in. And I felt like there were ghosts there. And I was on my way to the Teatro rehearsal. Close enough. Came into rehearsal, and I told people what happened, and we said, I was thinking, aquí vivimos en el barrio de West Denver, los vecinos están como compadres, trabajamos, lloramos y cantamos, porque somos todo lo que tenemos. Which began the song, which became the story. So the story, this piece was the first corrido that we wrote. It's a corrido that goes all through the whole piece. If you don't know what a corrido is a story, is a song that tells a story, a correr. It has the word correr in it, so it runs on and on. It slows down and speeds up and such. And that was the basis for what we were doing. It was the first time we did it. We did it everywhere, and we still did. I think we did it 2 years ago and stuff. And the story is still relevant. The songs got better, the music got better. We found that we can incorporate. So the corrido was really significant. So it's amazing what you can do with 2 chords, 3 chords, and lyrics that are relevant and important. Let's keep going. How are we at? We've got 5. That's what I said. Okay. And if that's the case, let me do this. Why don't we show? I'm going to show you a clip. I'm sorry. We knew I knew it was going to take longer than we had more material than we were going to be able to present. But we did a piece called "The War of the Flowers," which is about the Chicano strike in Brighton. Okay, and a lot of what I'm trying to talk to you guys about is how to use those things that we have around them and how they heal us. It is about the theme. So the women in the strike, Lupe Piseño, they were out on strike for a year. They decided to end the strike, but at the end of the strike, they actually went on in the gates in the front of the camp. What is it? Where the carnation plant, and they chained themselves to it. And when they did, the state police came in and tear gassed them at point blank range. So that was the final of the piece. We developed a piece in Brighton talking to people. And so one of the things is, her name is Lupe, Guadalupe Briseño. Guadalupe is La Madre de Dios, right? And so we decided to take the song, the Hail Mary, Dios te salve Maria, and put it in Spanish and put it in lyrics. And if we have time to go through it all, is that what you hear that the prayer, as they're anticipating it, but eventually the prayer turns into a fight song. I call it a fight song, a song of protest, if you will. And we're going to show it right now. Let's see how we do with this.
Guess we have to move on. And we, the women of the National Floral Workers Organization, got together to plan a strategy to end our strike on Saturday, February 15th.
Mary, Rachel, who was 6 months pregnant at the time, Marta, Verisayas, and myself arrived at Kitty Yama's at about 6
questions, if we want to have any kind of that kind of conversation, I'm open to it. Any comments? Any criticisms? Yes.
Yeah, Tony, I used to work at the Denver Civic Theater, and then Teatro took over that building. And I used to do the school touring program, back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell about that transition and how you guys took over that and the different phases of Teatro and a little bit of that history?
Sure. That's the other thing I was I was trying to get this article that I wrote that is exactly about all of that stuff. It's called Original Sinners and Institution Builders. And it's about all the transitions, infrastructural stuff that we've done in order to get us to where we are right now. So there were a number of things. The Denver Civic Theater is located in the Chicano barrio there, and it was actually converted. It was originally a Climate Theater, and it converted to a theater. Henry Lowenstein did that in the 1980s. And then Henry, after about 10, 12 years, Henry decided, I don't want to do this anymore. And he went into a bunch of different hands. And during that same time, we were at the Elyria building, Elyria School building, which is in Elyria, which is out by the Coliseum and stuff. It's amazing to me how we were able to draw people out to that space, because we had the parking lot had the divots all over the place. You could get in, but you couldn't get out. And we were packed. By the time, after we'd been there 21 years, we were packed. And our neighbors asked us if we could leave so they could have their parking spaces back. Because we were having shows like 5 days a week, and people would park and block their driveways. And we knew it was time for us to move on, so we started the process of moving to the Denver Civic Theater. And during that time, it had exchanged hands a bunch of times. There was a bunch of problems, financial problems with it. And actually, we started this process to move. We knew we had to move more centrally, and we actually bought a building further south. And then one day, I got a call from now he's a senator, but he was the mayor of Denver, John Hickenlooper, and he said, he was always a supporter of us, and he says, hey, how's everything going? I said, okay, John, why are you calling me? I don't know that you call me in the middle of no place, He called about 3 times at the theater, and he said, the mayor's looking for you. He was like, when did that happen? That's not in my life. And I said, I was like, oh shit, he must have found out I did something wrong. And I probably did, because I was doing an event without a license. And I thought that's what it was about. And I was really cautious. He said, what do you think about the Denver Civic Theater? And I said, I think it's a good place, and I wish those people luck. He goes, that deal fell through, what about you? And I said, what? And he says, I want you to take over the building. And I said, John, I owe you $2 million on this note. And he goes, what if I made that go away? I said, well, I'll bring it up. I'll talk about it. And so we went to the board, and the board said, are you out of your mind? I voted no, they all voted yes. And it took a while and a battle with the city, because he ran for governor, and then the city had no recollection of it. But the dumbasses actually voted down and talked to the bank, and that's what nailed it down for them. I was so mad. I just told them, we're not going to pay you, come and get it. And I don't know if that's exactly the story you wanted, but it was a battle. The battle went from the battle financially to, if you're going to come and fight with us over $2 million that you screwed up on, that's not going to look good on you. And my poor board, they were pretty nervous. Why did we even hang out with this guy? Anyway, thank you. And I'm going to make the article available for April. Will send it out to people. But it talks really about the financial and the infrastructure stuff. I was talking more about the artistic pieces of today, and we're actually doing a project, speaking of that, called Drama Be Trauma, where we do bring people in to talk about the role of art in healing and talk about their own trauma. We did another piece called Fire in the Streets, which was about the West High School blowouts. And again, the police played a role in this. The kids walked out, cops were waiting for them with tear gas and clubs, and they beat them and arrested them. And we did the production. And during the production, we use a lot of tear gas apparently in our shows. So we did the production. They got tear gas, and what happened is that people had been there, were starting to have traumatic reactions to these things. I had people come up to me and say, I haven't thought about this in 50 years, and now you're taking me right into there, and I don't know that I'm going to sleep tonight. I don't know that how I'm going to survive. We had to call the EMTs one night, because this woman said, it's just taking me back to being in the streets, and I can't breathe, I can't, and so they took him out. So we started this project, we thought, that's pretty, it's like, I was listening on the radio coming down here, and you guys got a great station, what's that station? They play like everything, what is it called? Jinx, Jazz, something?
KUBO.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm talking about. Anyway, so they started playing just like Romeo and Juliet, that song from the 50s, maybe some of you, just like Romeo. Do you want your children to be in a relationship like Romeo and Juliet? They both commit suicide, But that's just the callousness that sometimes we have done, and a misunderstanding of what we're actually putting out in front of people, That we're putting out this thing that's just going to have this beautiful relationship like Romeo and Juliet. That was not a beautiful relationship. That's dysfunctional, messed up, and teenagers should not kill themselves because they think they're going to hate that guy in 20 years, Why are you even messing with it? So, anyway, that's a little bit more relevant. So it made us start to think about what we're putting out there and putting out to our community, and then saying, how, when we did War of the Flowers, Martha, we didn't go into the tear gassing piece. Martha, one of the women on there, we tried to talk to her before we do the play. She said, I don't want to go back to that. It was terrible for me. The police put spikes on the ankles of the horses, and they pushed up against it. She goes, that was the most terrible day of my life, and now you want me to take me back in that place? We kind of, talked to her several times and respected listening to her. And she did come to see the play on opening night, and after she did, we had a lot of college students, and the women flocked. They just mobbed them, telling them how important they did. And she said, I always thought this was such a horrible time, and now that I see this and more objectively, I feel that we actually won. And I always keep those words of Martha with us, and that stuff. Yeah. So one question to go around, and I probably won't answer as long as the last time. Ask me a simple question. How you doing, Mark? I'll answer. I'll use you as an example. So we did a piece that Juan helped us with. Juan and Debbie Espinosa here. They've been so important to some of the things that we've done with the Teatro. We did a piece about the bombings of the 6 people in Boulder, Los Seis de Boulder. And Juan was and Deborah were very influential in terms of telling us the stories and introducing us to people. But by the time we got on stage, I realized as we were doing this, it kind of took me back to how we were in that time period. And when you're 18, 19, and 20 years old, no offense, but you're not really bright. There's a lot of things you do, a lot of ways you approach things. Especially, we were getting introduced to drugs along at the same time, too. So we did it, and there were some places in there that maybe were sad or we had this overriding tragedy. But there was a lot of sarcasm. Sarcasm is really important, guys. Keep it with you wherever you go. And there was these places where they were really, really funny. It was really, that's how we were. We were silly. And one came and said, I never anticipated that this could be funny. But in effect, tragedy plus time could actually work to a comedy. So it was a healing process that we go, okay, objectively, we made these mistakes. On the other end, these are the things we fought for, and it gives us that objectivity, and that's another value that we can take from the art stuff. Thank you all very much.